Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Make Your Mark podcast. And I have a really special guest for you today. Now, her name is Michelle Abraham. She is a podcast pioneer. She is also known as the entrepreneur, as a high vibe approach to life and in business. As a founder of Amplify You, North America's top podcast management company, Michelle has launched hundreds of podcasts, earning accolades like Entrepreneur of the Year. Now, with a passion for podcasting, she's on a mission to amplify voices, spark visions, and elevate visibility in the world of entrepreneurship. Oh my goodness, Michelle, thank you for coming onto the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Kate. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I know before we get into the nitty-gritty of your story, people are thinking, why would Kay, right, who also has a podcast management company, bring another podcast management into the company, right? And that's because we learn from each other, right? Every company does things very, very differently. And we've known each other for years now, right? And we met online, and our approaches are very different. But you also, and you pointed this out right at the very beginning when we spoke, there's not many females in the podcast production side of it. So we have to have high vibration
Woohoo!
with each other, right? So
That's right.
this is why I brought you here because, oh my goodness, you know so much about podcasting, right? And where it's going, and you've helped so many people, but we all have different stories and different reasons why we kind of got into this. And so, share with the audience today a little bit about what your journey looked like and how you ended up in this industry.
Yeah, I totally will. And I appreciate your also wanting to play together because there's like some people like sometimes there's not that like camaraderie and like I believe like there's no competition. I think like it's collaboration, right? And
Absolutely.
relationships are like king. And so I was so excited to meet another female run agency and I was like, yes, finally someone that can like understand like what we're doing, but also from a female perspective. So I
Right.
love it. It's a very male dominated industry, and I love that there's more and more females jumping into it and being a part of it. So, my
Absolutely.
story in the podcasting space started like so long ago. It's crazy. It started back in when I had a co working space, actually. I was opening a co working space that is outside the downtown area in Vancouver, where I live in Canada. And before that, there was no other co-working spaces in this area. And again, co-working spaces were kind of like this new thing. This is back in like 2012. And so we opened up this co-working space, and the first people that wanted to come and use our space was a group that was talking about blogging and social media, and they rented our space for doing events. And soon enough, the conversation of that group started becoming into podcasting. And so I started a meetup group that was specifically for our co-working space about how to start a podcast. I knew nothing about that at the time. That was more for me to like learn, right? So I searched, I'm like, okay, who's the experts on this space? And I could find two people. Two, that's it.
No way.
And this is back in 2012, and podcasting wasn't a thing. And everyone's like, what the
Right.
hell is podcasting? Yeah.
So wait, if podcasting wasn't even a thing, right? What made you think like, okay, this would be a great kind of industry to go down, not even knowing that later on it was going to pick up, right? Because you,
Yeah.
if no one knew about it, why would you go into that industry?
Right. Well, first of all, I didn't know it was going to pick up. I had a personal experience. My son was also born that year, and we
Mm,
were, doing the mom and baby thing, and I just felt like I was in a funk, and it wasn't in like my business brain was kind of gone to mush. So I turned on Apple TV. There's this podcast thing. I started listening to this show. I got so inspired and so motivated that I would take my son for a walk, and every Monday she'd drop an episode. I would like, well, first of all, I binge listen to all like 100 episodes that were there. Then I would wait for every episode to drop. And so I was like, well, I've had this crazy experience that helped me kind of like get out of a funk and get motivated and inspired by this show. And it's on my Apple TV at home. It's on my phone. It's also in my car. Like, but nobody's talking about it. So I kind of had this like thing here where I was like, this might be a thing one day, but I want to know more about it. I became like totally obsessed as a listener to podcasts. I'm like, if I've had this transformation, can you imagine like all the people out there that are whose lives are being transformed by the messages on the show? So that's really why I kind of went down that route of like starting a meetup group at my co-working space. Um And it took me several years before I launched my own show, actually 4 years.
Oh,
And 4 years before launching my own show, and I'd already launched about 50 other shows for other people.
wow.
And I like to say that I had to go through all the mistakes that now I see people making so
Mm,
that I could be a better like coach from the other side of it. Because if I wasn't scared, if I didn't have that fear of like, using my voice or, the fear of technology or all that kind of stuff, then it wouldn't be the same to relate to our clients that go through that all the time.
absolutely, absolutely. Now, did you have fear, and how did you, or if you did, how did you get over the fear of, oh my goodness, people are gonna actually hear me?
The fear that I was actually more afraid of was not that people were going to hear me, is that um if I picked a topic, I would have to stick with that topic for a long time and I couldn't change and I
Ah,
couldn't alter it. And then what if it got so popular? And like I wasn't ready for that. And like so that was more what was going on in my head. Like,
oh,
what if this
interesting.
thing actually does take off? And what if I actually, and then I couldn't get committed on an idea for a podcast. And coming from where you are right now, you probably can understand that like when I thought that maybe I want to do a podcast about podcasting, that sounds so ridiculous.
Right.
So I was like, I don't know if I could do a podcast about podcasting. That
Right,
sounds so
right.
weird. So anyways, fast forward many years. I was at our co-working space. I was doing a digital marketing company. We were launching books, launching courses, launching people's podcasts, but we were doing many different things. And one of my friends said to me, and you'll appreciate this, Kay, she said to me, Michelle, I know you're good at what you do, but I have no idea what you do. And I was like, oh, that is like not something someone in marketing wants to hear anyone
Right.
say. So I
Absolutely.
was like, shoot, I'm doing something wrong, I guess.
Yeah, do you know what? It's very funny because in the beginning stages, people were saying I was telling them everything that I do and it sounded awesome, and they go, wow. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, they so want to work with me. But they turn around and go, you're like the world's biggest secret. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't want to hear
Yeah.
that right now, right? So I hear where you're coming from.
Totally, like the world's biggest secret, or like I'm so confused as what you do. I have no idea. I can never hire you. I was like, that is not that is not a good thing. So I
No.
looked at everything we were doing. I'm like, yeah, okay, we're doing a lot of things that might be confusing to people. I'm like, what do I love doing? What is the pieces that is really cool to me, and what do I see like in the future? Because when I was listening to the podcast, and then I started this meetup group about podcasting, I would ask my friends, "Oh, what podcasts do you guys listen to?" And they would look at me like, "What the hell's a podcast?" And so I was like, "All right, well, that's still like early, I guess." But I looked at everything I was doing, and I loved the podcasting piece. It was so much fun helping people figure out that they wanted to talk about something and share it with the world and use their voice. And like this, there was just something about like seeing people like come with this idea and then it come to fruition, and then they get to like show up and speak about it every week and share their passion and excitement. So I really fell in love with the podcasting piece. So the minute we dropped everything else and just focused on podcasting was the minute we went from like mucking around like six figures to like seven figures in like less than a year. And so obviously there's some real truth to that saying, like pick a lane.
Absolutely. I love that. Oh my goodness. Now, you started in 2012, right? Back then we didn't have the platforms, the technology that we do today, right? So how did you get around to actually doing podcasts, or what methods were you using? Because there's so much out there now than there was before.
Yeah, well, it's so easy now, right? All you do
Right.
is open your computer, there's Zoom, and you press record. Like back then, it was like Skype, and there was this like,
Oh
I had to connect it. Actually, one of my mentors said he used to have a dial-up phone that he connected to this modem thing, and like they had to hold it like this.
my goodness.
That's really complicated. I came in a little after that, but I used to show this slide in my talks where it's like, this is what has stopped me from so long was that my idea of what podcasting was this table with all these mics and all these like amplifiers and all these things on this table of what I thought we needed. And then actually what we need is like the microphone and the laptop, and that's it. Thank God for technology.
Right. Okay, now I want to go into a little bit more in depth when it comes to technology and podcasting, right? Because technology has evolved so much, so has podcasting. And like you said, it has made things a lot easier for people to have a podcast. There's no reason why no one should have a podcast these days, right? And
Right.
so, what are your thoughts with regards to, the world of AI, right? AI meets podcasting. Do you think it's a good thing, a bad thing, or you're indifferent? Now, what are your thoughts on that?
So when AI started becoming a thing a couple of years ago,
Mm,
we had a team of about 15 podcast managers and an agency that was revolved around done for you services like yours, right? So
right.
we were looking at AI and going, "Oh crap, this is gonna like take over our take over our jobs." Like I think we might be going out of business soon. Like this is gonna be crazy. But then we had to look at some of the tools we were already using to help us edit and help us become better at doing our job. And we were already using tons of AI tools. We just hadn't really realized it.
Right.
Um, so it's like, oh yeah, okay, we're already doing, okay, so it's not going to take, it's not we went from the fear of like, oh shoot, it's going to take over what we're doing and nobody's going to need to hire us anymore to
Mm.
the no, we're still going to be needed, but the tools are going to make the production and the output so much better than they are right now in far less time. And so therefore could probably be a little bit more cost effective for our customers too.
Absolutely. Now, I like the kind of the mindset shift that you had there, right? Because a lot of people are in fear of
Yeah.
losing their jobs, their positions, their business, whatever it is, because of AI, right? And so you flipped that. So what was it? Was it just knowing what you're using right now and the AI technology that's out there and comparing it that made you feel like a little bit at ease? Or how did that mindset shift occur and make you feel safe again?
Yeah, well, the first thought was in our team meeting was our team was like, but our clients are going to be able to do this by themselves, like so much easier now. I'm like, yes, but we do a done for you service for a reason because they don't want to do it themselves. They don't know how and they don't have the time to do it. So there's still there that need there. So let's not worry about that. But what we can do is now we can add a whole bunch of other things into our production and output that maybe before, like to be honest, like the transcript thing was like a huge pain in the ass for our team because they would do the AI would do the this is the old AI would do the transcripts, but it'd be full of errors and full of like that it
Mhm.
would take them so long to edit it so that it was publishable,
Mhm.
that it was like an hour to 2 hour process of redoing the transcripts where now the AI is so good that it doesn't need to be re-edited. And then the AI, we can pull the show notes then into ChatGPT and organize the show notes in a much better way with their content instead of having to create the show notes on our own. So that's something that has been really helpful because most of our team did not like doing show notes because you're having to write in someone else's language
Yes.
using their transcript, and the AI does a much better job of it than we ever could.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. Now, do you have any kind of AI tools in particular that are your like go-to tools to have, right? And is an absolute must for any podcast?
Ooh, good question. Okay, so there's a lot of like really cool ones out there that we use. So one of the ones that I think was early on that our team really liked was Descript.
Oh
And
yeah.
one of the cool things about Descript was that you could like edit a word in the writing part of it and it would change it in the video. And we're like, what?
Yes.
That is so cool because we do most of our podcasts are in video format, as I'm sure most of your clients are. So it was like we were editing the video and then extracting the audio. So we had to edit the video part of it. So we were video editing, then audio editing. And so yeah, that was a really good one was the Descript at first. That was
Yes.
like one of the first like ahas, like, wow, this is really cool.
Definitely, definitely. Now, I mean, Descript is one of the ones that I actually shout and rave about as well. I absolutely love it and how easy it is. Now, what kind of things, I guess, downfalls or mistakes, should I say, people are making, are you finding when it comes to producing their podcasts, right? Because a lot of people like to have a tinker around themselves, right? And which is okay, but then they don't know the full story. They don't realize, right? So what have you noticed that where people are making a lot of mistakes when they're producing their podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question. Oh gosh, so many things. I don't know where to start. I think at the end of the day, what happens is they get so excited about the production of it that it ends up taking more and longer and longer and longer, and it ends up being such a production and such a long process that it's not sustainable to keep doing that over and over again every week. And for me, like I just love the recording part of it, and then I love seeing it produce. I don't love the middle part, which is why I had started an agency to do the middle part. But I love that people are like do it themselves, and I think I appreciate that because it's nice to know. It's nice for you to be able to know how to do it yourself if you ever
Mm,
need to. But it's also nice to let go of that control and let someone else do it. So I think that's one of the mistakes is they hold on to the control of it too long, where it becomes so heavy on them. You're an amazing coach or expert or wellness professional or naturopathic doctor or whatever. You're not an editor, like
right.
producer, like that. Maybe you should just leave that to the other people to do, even though you can do it. It's just that should you do it? Is that a good use of your time? And I think that's the key thing. That yes, they could totally do it, but it's not a good use of their time.
Right, absolutely. I totally agree with you there, especially with people that we work with, business owners, entrepreneurs. Like we said earlier, we got to stick to your lane, what you're good
Yeah.
at, right? And then outsource the rest of it, right? Because it isn't a good use of your time. And it's funny because one of the things that I've noticed that people do, they get stuck on the title of the podcast, right? That's one of
Oh
the things,
yeah. Yeah.
right, that really kind of stops them, or the design of their cover, right? Like the setup, and kind of going round and round and round in circles, and everyone wanting it perfect. It has to be perfect, right? And we know, Michelle, it doesn't need to be perfect. You
No,
can
it
change
doesn't.
it later on down the line, right? And it's gonna happen as you progress, and you build on your podcast. It's gonna happen, right? And that's one of the biggest mistakes I see constantly.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. That need to be perfect to perfect, which we call it analysis paralysis, which stops you then from launching. And then we have this little saying that we say if you're not embarrassed by your first few episodes, you waited too long to put them out there. So just get going. Then you'll love it. Then you can adjust. And that was actually one of the reasons that I was stalled for so many years because I thought it had to be like this in a
Mm,
container that could never change, right? So I was wanting to make sure I was absolutely sure I wanted to do a podcast about podcasting and it can't change. But really, when you let go of that control, it should change. It should evolve because your evolution as a podcast host is huge over especially the first 20 episodes. And then there should be some changes that you make after you get comfortable behind the microphone and get really clear because the clarity in your message comes from the more times that you're speaking. And so you should be making those adjustments as you go along. It's like, thought we were talking about peanut butter and jam, but maybe we're just talking about peanut butter today. So it's all good. If that's the way your podcast goes, then that's great. That go with it.
definitely. And do you know what? It's so funny because a lot of my clients, right, they've turned around and said to me, you know what, Kay? We saw you on stage, but we didn't purchase, right? Because we had to go and do our due diligence. I was like, okay, perfect, right? And they're like, we went and researched you. I was like, okay, great. And they were like, but we didn't go look at the new episodes that you did. We went all the way back to the very first one you did, right? And then they went quiet. I'm like, wow, what's up? And they go, you were terrible, right? They were like, you were awful. I was like, well, thank you very much, right? And they go, but now you're speaking on stage, right? That just shows me you're the person I need to work with, right? If you were that bad. So putting
If you were that bad.
it out there.
I love how honest your clients are. That's awesome.
Right. Right. And so they were like, so having like not a perfect episode, right, will actually benefit you in the long run, right? Because your
Right.
clients will actually see your progress, right? So don't wait to be perfect. They just want to see someone genuine and authentic and they want to see your
Right.
journey, right? That's what's
Totally.
important.
Yeah, that's so good. And they will go back and check your first episodes
They
that suck.
will. And I can tell everyone that's listened to this episode is probably going to do the same thing now, right?
Yeah.
How bad was she? Oh my goodness. But yeah,
Okay, everyone was. Nobody started out as good as they are at episode 300 at episode one.
right, right. And so, how many episodes, Michelle? Like, how many podcasts should I say, have you actually produced?
Yeah, oh, that's a good question because well, we've launched about 450 shows for people.
Ooh,
And out of those 450 shows over the course of a couple of years, we've on average been producing between 75 and 100 of them a week.
wow.
So I haven't really done the math on like how many over time because it's fluctuated a little bit, how many episodes that has been, but it's a lot. So if we're looking at like a show that does once a week, if we're on a higher level, that's about 400 episodes a month times 12. We're looking at close to 5,000 episodes
Oh,
a year that we're producing.
wow.
But that's for our clients. For myself, at one point, I had 3 podcasts that I was doing. I've
Oh,
scaled down a little bit, and I've pivoted a little bit too. So so now I am doing the Amplify You podcast, but I've got a few other podcasts that now I want to launch and use them very strategically to enroll people in certain things and have guests on for specific things. So my favorite thing to use podcasting for is the best connecting tool ever,
right. Yes.
right? So inviting people on who you want to get into an industry or a space or that you want to be able to get in front of other people in that space. Yeah, starting a podcast in that space is the best thing to do. And our one of our clients, Amy Riley, she does this great. Like she had this like corporation coaching business that it was hard to get through all the like, gatekeepers, right? But having a podcast where she invited the CEOs to come have a conversation with her made it super easy for her to be able to get through to those CEOs that she wanted to talk to. So just in that example, that's where really being more strategic before you start your podcast has been really helpful.
Yeah, most definitely. I feel like a lot of people go say that they want a podcast, start a podcast because everyone else is doing it, right? But without realizing, first of all, what it takes, right? Making sure you have the
Yeah.
commitment there because you are in it for the long term, right? Or even not even knowing what the end goal is. Like, why are you even starting a podcast, right? Because podcasting can help with so many different things. Because I remember when I first started my podcast, it was about networking, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily about getting leads in, it was about networking, right? Because I started my podcast during the pandemic when we couldn't go anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to talk to people.
Right?
And so that was the idea, right, behind it. And so you got to understand what the end goal is, why you're doing it, right? Like, is it to network? Is it to do all of them? And so getting that understanding is super, super critical to making sure that you have the right strategy and process, right?
Definitely. Yeah, like I started a hosting a podcast that was about parenting only
Mm.
because I wanted to be a better parent. And so
Oh,
I
wow.
did 300 episodes of that show, and I was like, "Okay, now I feel like I'm a better parent." Now that we ended up doing some really interesting things with the guests we had on that show, where we invited them to co-create some courses and things like that. So that was a different kind of show for me to host, but I learned a lot, and I became a much better parent in the process of doing that.
Yeah, it's funny how much as a host that you learn from bringing on guests as well, right? Not
Yeah.
just about your audience, right? But we learn so much from other people and what they're doing too, right? It's astonishing.
Yeah, and so this is, I think, this is a great, like, the great point right here as to what makes a good podcast and what makes a crappy podcast. So
Yeah.
I went into that parenting podcast as like, I know nothing about parenting. I'm a new parent. Like my kids are like under 5. Like, let's bring on some experts that I'm gonna learn from them, and I'm gonna be like the guide for the audience. Hey guys, I'm going on this journey to become a better parent. Come join me, learn with me, and then we can be better parents. And coming from that angle was like far better than being like, I'm an expert at parenting, even though my kids are under 5. And I've only been doing it for a couple of years, but I'm an expert at parenting. Listen to me. This is what I think you should do. So, instead of coming from that kind of positioning, being curious. And I think that's the difference between a good podcast and a crappy podcast. The
Absolutely.
ones that run out at 20 episodes are the ones that come in there trying to be the expert on something. Where, if you bring people along the journey with you, you have a lot longer, more content, more space to explore, more ways to be the guide instead of being the hero.
Absolutely, definitely. And it's funny because I don't know about you, but I hear a lot of saying, well, if you're going to start a podcast, shouldn't you be the one that has the content? Why would you bring other people, other guests on when it's your podcast and you want to bring leads into your business? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, well, I think you should do both. So I think you should have a podcast like perfectly aligned where you speak to like both your potential joint venture partners, potential collaborators, people that you respect and admire in your space that maybe speak to the same audience, but from a different angle, kind of like what we're doing today.
Yeah.
Whereas like then you could also bring on people who like the Amplify You podcast is an example. I interview other podcasters maybe that didn't launch their show with us, just like, okay, what did you do? What are you using? What's the cool stuff? And they
Right.
might say, I hate doing show notes. And after that, I'd be like, hey, we do show notes. If you wanted to use your show notes, we could totally do that. So we're talking to our customers and also people that serve the same audience as us, just
Absolutely.
different types of shows on the same podcast.
Definitely, definitely. Oh my goodness. Now, I know, Michelle, at this point, people are probably thinking, okay, I need to learn more, right? Or I'd like to get to know Michelle a little bit more about what she does and everything, right? And I know that you've got a special gift for our audience today. So you want to
I
tell us a little bit
do.
about that?
Yeah, we kind of like touched the tip of the iceberg on the AI tools. And
Amazing.
I totally want to know if you have one that's good for cover arts, because that's the one I have not found a good one for cover art.
No, not for cover art. No, I haven't found a tool for a cover art yet, but I'm sure it's going to be on its way.
I'm sure it will be too. Other than like our amazing Canva is great, but
Right.
it's not necessarily AI. Although it's getting some new AI stuff in it, which is
That's
cool.
right.
Yeah, but I'm on the look for a cool like cover art creator because I think that'd be neat.
Now
But
you got me
anyways,
thinking. I'm gonna go hunting to see if I can find an
there's
AI.
gotta be one out there, right?
There has to be. I'm gonna go hunting now. I'm gonna kind of start messaging people. Hey, does anyone know a great tool for this?
Right? I think that'd be cool. So the gift I have for everyone is a little mini training that we did. We took 10 of the tools that we use to supercharge our podcast. So using things like ChatGPT and using things like Capsho or Cast Magic or other kind of new tools that are out there, we took 10 of them and we showed you how we could use them to make your podcast production just a lot better. If you're doing it yourself or if you have your team doing it, you can show your team how to use these better
All
too.
right.
So there are 10 tools. My brother, who is the CEO of Amplify You now, him and I taught this together. And it's just a little mini course that I think is great to help you just, supercharge your podcast production with AI.
Fantastic. And where can they go? What's the link for them to actually go ahead and get that?
Sure, and I'm sorry, it's not very podcast friendly link. So that's one of the things I always tell people, make sure your link is really easy for people to do on the mobile. This one is not, I'm sorry. But it's amplifyu.system with an E at the end of it, .io/ super cool AI tools for podcasters. So it's a
Oh,
little bit long, a little bit crazy. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes.
absolutely. All everything that you've told us, we're going to put into the show notes, all the links, all that good stuff. We're going to definitely put it there, guys. Oh my goodness. So go and reach out to Michelle, right? Go and get the download, right? And have a look at that because that's going to totally change the way you do podcasting. It's going to be awesome. And the fact that Michelle and her brother have curated this, right? It's going to blow your mind. I guarantee it. Michelle, do you have any last words to share with our audience before we go?
Oh my gosh. Just that, just, know that your voice is needed out there and using your voice to spread joy and love and have abundance in your life is the way to do it through podcasting. And don't do it yourself. Hire a company, hire us to do it for you, to help you, to guide you through it, to make it better, to make it easier on yourself because your gifts are probably not in podcast production. They're much bigger, much greater, and let someone else do that podcast production for you.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Michelle, thank you for coming to the show. So many golden nuggets in such a short amount of time. I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Make Your Mark podcast at www.makeyourmarkpodcast.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get this and every other episode that comes out. We have lots of great stuff coming, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And thank you in advance for all the reviews and comments. I appreciate it so much, and I look forward to serving you in next week's episode.